This just in, Russell Westbrook is really good. It's ClipperBlog Live. Fred Katz here following the Clippers' 118-112 loss to the Thunder. OKC now takes a 2-1 series lead. So many laws broken tonight. It's the first time in 36 games this season the Clippers have lost when leading after 3. The Clippers were the first to 100 points tonight. Lawler's law is broken. And in Los Angeles, we have our own law, Law Murray law. The Clippers just kind of got outplayed tonight, right?
They got outplayed over the course of the game, which was disappointing. I mean, they came out, dropped 36 points in the, not 36, 33 points in the first quarter, and I mean, you know, they had this thing won, but they just saved their worst for last, and that's really disappointing when you're at home.
Yeah, I mean, it was. It almost just seemed like Oklahoma City played. I don't even think the Clippers played that poorly. There were parts to critique. We'll obviously talk about that in a second.
Right.
Oklahoma City just played really well. I mean, I thought the biggest microcosm was in the fourth quarter. The Clippers started really switching everything on the pick and roll more so than they had the entire game. And there was a mismatch, you know, late in the game, like a minute left or something, and Chris Paul to switch on to Kevin Durant, and Westbrook gave it to Durant, you know, posting him up about 17 feet away, and Durant just hit this outrageous fadeaway that switched in, which you know what, like, if you've got Durant guarding Chris Paul, like, that's the shot that you want him taking. That is the absolute first shot that you want Kevin Durant taking, and it just switched in. It's like there's nothing you can do about plays like that.
Hey, you know what? We might as well just cut right to the chase. Yeah, that was Durant on Chris Paul, but at this point, Chris Paul has a bullseye right on his jersey. You know, it's red, white, and blue, Clippers colors, and they're going right at him. And this is about to be a very difficult series for Chris Paul. Like, it takes one great shot, one great shooting game for us to really say, oh, Chris is good, thumb's good, hamstring's good. Chris hasn't been in the league that long. He's got this. Russell Westbrook he's got the scope out, and Westbrook is about to make himself a lot more, even more famous than he already is, at Chris Paul's expense. And this is something that I feel like Game 4, Chris has to look at his stat sheet and realize this dude is absolutely killing him.
Well, let's talk some Westbrook, because Westbrook tonight, 23 points, 13 assists, 8 boards, only 2 turnovers tonight. It's the first time in 8 games he had fewer than 4 turnovers. He was unreal tonight. He was unreal in Game 2. He was actually really good in Game 1. He was 9 for 14 in the field in Game 1, and had, I think, like 29 points on 14 shots. He's been ridiculous all series, really all playoffs. He's got 3 triple-doubles, and he almost got his 4th triple-double in 6 games tonight. So we're at the point where it's almost disappointing when he doesn't get a triple-double. What in the world? I mean, you know, Chris Paul's reputation coming into the series, it was, you know, Westbrook's going to torch Paul, and Paul is good against guys like Curry because that's a different type of player where Paul can play, you know, he played great defense in that series, and he can play a more crafty style of defense, and that's more intelligence-based defense versus athleticism-based defense. And we're kind of seeing the reason for why people were saying that now. So what can the Clippers as a team do to try to at least, you know, they're not going to stop Westbrook because you're not going to stop a top 10 player if he's playing at the top of his game. But what are you going to do to at least try to combat him and contain him within this, you know, the unbelievable way that he's been playing?
Well, one adjustment that you know, we've talked about is that Darren Collison's minutes has gotten cut because Darren Collison is the type of player who, if you don't have that pressure coming at you defensively, Collison can more than tread water in a playoff series against a lot of guards. But Westbrook is just someone who's swallowing him up and spitting him out. And Collison was an unfortunate non-factor tonight. No points in 10 minutes, and Fred, I think you said he didn't even touch the floor in the second half.
Yeah, I think he played like 2 minutes in the second half or something. I mean, I think he had 8 minutes in the first half, and then he played 2 or 3 minutes in the second half. I don't think he saw the floor in the third quarter at all. He was, yeah. I mean, you know, it was. We talked about it after Game 3 on CBL. Like, is Collison so much of an issue that you really should be limiting his minutes to maybe 10 a game now? Because when he's in the game, Westbrook's just going right at him. He's posting it up, and the Clippers have to double team, or he's just isoing and getting to the rim, and everybody ends up, you know, swarming into the lane. And Westbrook's either getting layups, he's getting fouls, or he's just kicking out to wide open shooters. It's, you know, kind of a problem either way. And I guess Doc kind of got away from Collison tonight, which I thought was somewhat of an improvement, but at the same time, you know, in that last play, or not the last play, but really the dagger, the one that kind of killed the Clippers when Reggie Jackson got the ball about 60 feet away from the rim with 30 seconds left and just drove in a straight line on Jamal Crawford all the way to the rim and eventually getting fouled by Matt Barnes. He was totally unimpeded, and I thought it was strange to see Jamal Crawford out there on a defensive set when you absolutely need to have a stop. Doc's going with Jamal Crawford, and that's kind of a theme we've seen all year, which I know Andrew Hahn brought up on Twitter before the game. We've seen the whole season that Doc is trusting his lineups to Crawford defensively and Collison defensively. I mean, so many times we've seen Collison at the 2, Crawford at the 3, and those sorts of lineups and those sorts of decisions. It's a little puzzling to me because I think Doc is a really tremendous coach. But that sort of decision-making seems a little bit out of line with his character. You know, he was a defense-first guy in Boston, which I guess, you know, makes sense with the type of roster makeup he had, but he was unconventional about it. You know, people thought that Avery Bradley was a point guard, and then he was the one who made them realize, oh, this guy is definitely a shooting guard, and he was really good at it when he moved.
Well, he was a shooting guard because he wasn't a point guard, though. That's the thing with Avery Bradley. Avery Bradley loves to defend, gets into it, can't play point guard. He couldn't play point guard. Texas sure as heck can't play point guard now. Dude can't drop 3 assists a game if he has the ball for 40 minutes, okay? Like, that's the thing with Avery Bradley. And that's the difference between those Boston teams where you had a Avery Bradley, you had a James Posey, you had Doc who would say, you know what, Ray, take a seat so we can get a different kind of lineup out here, and what he's got going now. When you talk about personnel, these guys have been awesome all season long. But all of these guys, Redick, Crawford, Collison, they're offense-first guys. And they're not only offensive-first guys, they don't have the bodies to really impose their will even if they wanted to try and exert energy defensively. It's just not in their physical makeup. And the bigger issue now, when we talk Collison, Crawford, Crapathon lineup, is Doc would play wings if he knew he could play those guys. Dudley, Danny Granger can't play in this series. It's a damn shame because they brought guys onto this roster at the expense of a few guys. Eric Bledsoe, Caron Butler, who hit some key threes tonight. All those guys are off the roster to bring certain personnel in, and those guys, they're just not fitting. Dudley absolutely cannot stay in front of anybody. It doesn't matter if they're 250 or 200, 6'10 or 6'4. Dudley can't play in this series. Granger can't play in this series. And now if Collison's out the rotation, you really only have one guy under 6'8 who can play 20 minutes in this series, and that's Crawford. That's the problem. You got to fight fire with fire, and then that brings the other problem, Fred. They're not hitting the threes. Westbrook got his face shot off in Game 1, but since then, Chris hasn't been that special shooting the three ball. And they hit 6%. They only hit 1 in the second half, and that one they hit was by a guy who got benched for most of the second half, J.J. Redick, inside 5 seconds when the game was pretty much decided. That's your series right there, Fred.
Yeah, you know, you said the Clippers were 7 of 26 from 3. Chris Paul was 8 of 9 from 3 in Game 1, so that's kind of the difference. And the thing is, the good news is the Clippers are at least getting these shots off. They're getting looks. I mean, they're getting legitimate looks. They're getting lots of looks from the corners. They're just not necessarily going down. I mean, Jovan Buha wrote in 3-on-3 today that the Clippers shot, 55% on uncontested looks in Game 1. And they were down to 40% or 44% on uncontested looks in Game 2. I haven't looked up what it was tonight, but I'm betting that it was a lot closer to the 44% than the 55% that we saw in Game 1 from tonight. They're missing a lot of open shots, but the good news is for the Clippers, that's a correctable thing. I mean, that's not something. If you're missing open shots, that's on you. And those sorts of things tend to change up over short periods of time. That can be, you know, those numbers can be convoluted by 1 or 2 game sample sizes versus the larger sample. So, and the Clippers tend to shoot better at home. I really didn't think the Clippers played that poorly tonight, but like you said, I think there is a personnel issue at some point. I think a lot of people. Let me ask you this question, just straight up, not even an extended answer, because I hear so many people talk about the Clippers' depth, and I've never really thought the Clippers were very deep, even after bringing on guys like Turkoglu and Davis and Granger midseason, and you know, as they got health back together. I never really thought of them as deep. I thought of them as more deep deep in names than deep in quality. Would you say that the Clippers are a deep team because they play a they play a 10-man rotation, which is something that you think a deep team would do?
Uh, it depends on your definition of deep, but if you want the straight up answer, no. You saw it tonight. Look at the minutes tonight. Who got 20 minutes tonight?
Yeah, well there you go. That's
If
fair enough.
you
I
a
mean,
significant player, if you're a guy who's got to play, you play 20 minutes, and that's how you have your rotation at 8 guys, you know. Who can play 20 minutes? There's your answer.
so what should the rotation be going forward? Because I'm not saying that Collison should be out of the rotation. I don't think that's true. I think you can play Collison when Reggie Jackson's out there. I think you can get him in. Like tonight, he got him in 10, 11 minutes, and I think that's perfectly acceptable. At the same time, I wish more minutes would come to J.J. Redick. I've kind of been wishing that all year. I don't know if it's still a health issue with the shoulder, and they don't want to play him 36 minutes, but I can't imagine that would be the issue because he's still playing 30, and he's still playing every single game. I wish Redick would be out there. I think the defense is just innumerably better when Redick's out there. And I think the best way, going back to the Westbrook problem, I think part of the best way to get to Westbrook is if he's going to be driving by your point guard defenders no matter what, you better have guys who rotate on time to come over and help at least. And I think Redick is going to help in a much greater capacity in that sense than someone like Jamal Crawford, who tends to get lost when he's off the ball, or someone like Collison, who does so even more. So, I mean, I think if you have Redick out there for 36 minutes, it's going to make somewhat of a difference with guys like Durant when he's running around off the ball, and even just getting to Caron Butler was left open in the corner like 3 or 4 times tonight. I think he hit 2 of those threes, and it was because the Clippers were late getting to him in the corner. Blake Griffin didn't close out in time. Serge Ibaka made an incredible steal on another one, which maybe wasn't a legal screen, but sometimes the best screens are illegal screens. And the Clippers just weren't getting to him in the corner. They were leaving him there. And I think if you have guys who are rotating on time, then maybe those sorts of shots don't happen. And that's something where Redick, I think, can help as opposed to a Crawford or a Collison. I'm not even calling for fewer minutes for Crawford. I'm just calling for a different type of minutes. I would rather see him playing a little bit more point, and then all of a sudden, if you don't want to run him out, if you don't want to run him at point, you don't want to run your offense through him because the offenses tend to go stagnant when you have the ball in his hands all the time, then you run it through Blake Griffin in the high post while he's out there for 6 minutes a night. I don't see why that would be the worst thing in the world for this offense when offense is hardly the issue right now.
I think, okay, when you bring up Redick, here's the thing that's important. Here's the thing that we talked about in another 3-on-3. Because we're talking about Redick as a defensive, as to why he's not as much of a defensive drop-off from a guy like Crawford. J.J. Redick is 8 of 28 shooting threes in 6 games against Oklahoma City. That's sub 30%. You have J.J. Redick on the floor not because of what you're worried about defensively, but because you need him to shoot well. You need him. Doc needed him tonight, and respect to J.J., but he didn't have it tonight. He didn't score in the first half. He got looks, and he didn't have. Sometimes with J.J. Redick, I mean, he's a good shooter. He's a very good shooter, but sometimes we tend to think of good shooters as guys who, if they're on the floor, they're going to be automatic. JJ's not always that guy, and he wasn't tonight. And I think JJ earns his 30, 35 minutes if he has the kind of first half tonight that he had in Game 2. And that's the biggest thing. This should be a J.J. Redick series. You brought him here because he can run off the ball and do things the defenders on any team, not just Oklahoma City's. But if he's going to shoot poorly, then that's the concern. It's not about the defense. It's he needs to shoot well. All these guys need to shoot well. Crawford didn't shoot well tonight. Matt Barnes, hot start, didn't really hit those threes that they were giving him. You lose game by 6 points, those things hurt. You talk about the jump shots not falling tonight. In some ways, yeah, it's correct. In other ways, it's like, are these guys want to shoot well? Now a lot of pressure's on in Game 4 for these guys to shoot the basketball well, Fred.
Yeah, you're right. Let's talk about something the Clippers did well tonight, though, because it wasn't like it was all bad. It was a close game, and we keep saying they play well, and we're not really talking about what played well. At the top, it was really good tonight after seeing Blake Griffin struggle like crazy in Game 2. 34 points on 22 shots, 8 boards, 4 assists. Chris Paul was ridiculous offensively, 21 points, 16 assists. 0 turnovers with those 16 assists. That's amazing. I wish I had actually looked up on Basketball Reference the last time someone in a playoff game had 16 assists and no turnovers. I would want to know when that was, so I might look that up in 1 second. But is with these games, I mean, we've seen Paul be great for the last pretty much 4 or 5 games offensively now. It makes sense that this is what he's going to do. With Blake Griffin, though, would you say that this is a more appropriate gauge of how he's going to be for the rest of this series, or is Game 2 the more appropriate gauge?
Well, I'll tell you what, man. Blake made it look very easy tonight. He really did. I mean, I think the most difficult thing he had to do tonight was stop a nosebleed. I mean, Blake just, I mean, he had the transition game going. He had the jump shot going. He had that thing where he doesn't even look at the basket and he makes shots in the paint going. He had a few plays where guys would collapse on his lob to DeAndre, like the attempt to lob. He'd get it in the paint around the elbow area. And what he would do is he would take that collapse and drive and lay it in. You see so much of what you would call Blake Griffin's menu, his set of tools. And again, Ibaka, he stayed on the floor in the second half, and Blake was still putting up digits. So I actually think with the way Blake Griffin plays, he could absolutely, continue to have 30-point games in this series. He absolutely could. And that's the thing. You're going to get offense. The Clippers scored 112 points tonight against a team that was a top 10 defensive team. When you talk about efficiency or whatever, that's good, man. That's really good. And it's not a fluke. They do this to Oklahoma City every game. Blake does this every game.
Yeah, and I actually thought Blake Griffin's defense. I thought we saw a little bit of promise from him when he got to 45 tonight. He was good tonight. I mean, he kind of killed it with that verticality, which is something we kind of see him try every once in a while. He had that sick block on Steven Adams. He had a couple of other good contests. Ibaka made a great layup up against him, but it was a great contest in the fourth quarter. He did a pretty good job defending the rim tonight, which is something we don't usually see from Blake. Getting back to the Chris Paul stat, the only player in playoff history, well, not playoff history, since 1985, the only player to go for 21 points, 16 assists, and no turnovers is Magic Johnson in 1991. It's the only other person ever to put up that line. This is only the 5th time since 1985 that anyone has had 16 assists and no turnovers in a playoff game. Last guy to do it, Rajon Rondo in 2009. So that's it's pretty nice company. Rondo, Kidd, Magic Johnson, and Robert Reed, the only other guys to do it. So Chris Paul with a pretty distinguishably nice line tonight.
Yeah.
But like you said, Westbrook doing it as well. Let's take a couple questions. Matt Barnes is a guy who has been guarding Kevin Durant most of this series, and I think has done a pretty decent job. But apparently T. Hodge thinks that Barnes has been really hurting them. Before I get to the second part of the question, I just want to know, do you agree with that assessment? Because I actually think that Barnes has done a pretty admirable job on KD, and that his lines have more just been a product of him being filthy. Like some of the moves that he had tonight and in Game 2 have just been outrageous with the way that he's been finding ways to score the ball. How would you assess Barnes' defense and overall play so far in tonight, and I guess so far in the series?
Well, again, it would be nice if Matt could hit those threes, but you almost have to pinch yourself watching Matt Barnes because, again, he's the 34-year-old former second-round pick who was about to join the NFL after his first couple years didn't work out too well in the NBA. So the fact that he's even starting and putting up, admirable numbers is, he's been very good. He's been very good. He wasn't supposed to even be here. Just in a vacuum, Barnes is doing enough. He's doing what he can. You have to understand that Kevin Durant is the most valuable player in the year. I mean, that's Kevin Durant. You're not going to really stop him. What you will hope to do is hope that he'd be less efficient. But I'm telling you, him and Westbrook, they smarten up and stop shooting all those threes. They stop beating themselves in a sense. And it's like, short of, getting a gremlin and putting it in Durant's earpiece, what are you going to do? You know, Barnes is doing what he can with the fact that he's 6'6", not all that athletic, and quite old. He's 10 years older than Kevin Durant almost. I don't
Yeah.
think he's hurting that much.
Yeah, and you mentioned offhand just now with Westbrook. I mean, one of the reasons that the Oklahoma City offense is clicking so much right now is, the strategy that Memphis took with Westbrook and the Clippers are taking. They're going under screens. They're trying to keep him away from going to the rim, and they're figuring just let him pull up for those 18 to 24 footers and hope he misses them, because a lot of the time he does. And when Westbrook misses shots, he's got a hard shot. They tend to be long rebounds too, which helps the Clippers get out in the break a lot as well, because they don't have to worry about outlet passes and those sorts of things, or they get quicker outlet passes. But the thing about Westbrook is he's passing a lot out of those now. And when you go under screens, it usually takes away passing lanes. The thing about Westbrook is so good at those cross-court passes right after coming around the screen. He's so good at hitting the corner with those shots when he puts them on point, with those passes when he puts them on point. It's killer. It's a killer offensive play. The second part of the Barnes suggestion is, as you said, he's 34 years old. He's probably not getting any better. This is not necessarily as relevant to tonight's game, but is there any way, this is the second night in a row we've gotten a Reggie Bullock question, is there any way that Reggie Bullock could step into his role as the 3 and get the Clippers over the hump against teams like the Thunder next year? I think the Reggie Bullock obsession is so strange to me. I think he's going to be a nice player, but a couple of years ago, or last year, we get all these questions about Trey Tompkins, and if Trey Tompkins could play more, the Clippers could just win. Yeah, well, guess what? Trey Tompkins has not played in the league since the Clippers released him, and all he's done is release like some weird rap song that a few thousand people watched on YouTube, and that was it. And I find it so. Reggie Bullock is not Trey Tompkins. Trey Tompkins was a second-round pick from Georgia, but the fact that people think that like Reggie Bullock is some savior is so. I don't want to sound like I'm knocking Reggie Bullock. I'm an advocate of him. I think he's going to be a good 3-and-D player when he puts it all together. But like let's have some realistic expectations, because I think people are going to be kind of disappointed when they realize this guy's not going to be as good as Kevin Durant.
Here's the thing, because I've been watching the NFL draft, the last couple days, and you see all these guys and their highlight clips, and you think to yourself, oh, that's going to translate. It might take a little bit of time. We gotta be a little patient, but I see skill, I see size, I see potential. And Reggie, I don't think Reggie played 1,000 minutes this season, and a lot of that hope, that promise, a lot of professional sports being invested in it is that hope, that thinking that you know what, he hasn't shown it yet, but maybe it's just we just need to wait for it. Have some time. Reggie isn't ready for this stage, okay? Reggie would be in a suit and tie if Hito didn't hurt his back. And we saw enough of Reggie Bullock to know that he needs another summer to understand a few things about guarding professional athletes, okay? Like, the potential is there, but that's what it is. It's potential. You bottle up, you put it away. You don't ask him to get his soul crushed by Kevin Durant, okay? We don't need a LeBradford Smith right now. So people need to relax on that. I mean, you might as well ask for Willie Green to go out there closer in size to Tony Allen and any other Clipper guard.
You say Reggie would be in a suit and tie? Actually, he's Reggie Bullock. He would be in a red suit and a beater is what he would be in, because that's what Reggie Bullock wears when he doesn't play. And I don't know anyone else who has that combination, but that is what Reggie wears apparently. We got another question from Timothy Payne. This is a good one. The Clippers again out-rebounded. Was it 44-33 tonight? They got out-rebounded by 16 in Game 2, out-rebounded by 16 in Game 1. So this is what, 59? They're minus 59 in 3 games right now in this series. That's a real problem. They're losing a lot of possessions, even though they won the turnover battle, +8 tonight in the turnover battle. They're losing tons of possessions on these. You see Russell Westbrook outmanning DeAndre Jordan for rebounds. You see Blake Griffin leaking out, maybe when he should be crashing the boards. What can the Clippers do about these rebounding issues? Because they were 26 in defensive rebounding rate this year, so it's not like they were a great defensive rebounding team to begin with. But there's got to be some way that they can have to solve these rebounding issues, because if Westbrook's just going to be averaging 9 rebounds a game in this series, then they're not going to have enough possessions in order to to really be able to do anything offensively to keep up with this team, right?
Here's what I got to say about that. I realized that Oklahoma City out-rebounded them. The Clippers got 14 more field goal attempts than the Thunder tonight. 14. They lost a game by 6 points, getting out-rebounded, but they still got 14 extra field goal attempts in this game. So, number one, first of all, you're not going to ever out-rebound this team. The only Clippers who can rebound to save their lives ever is Jordan and Griffin. And both of those guys are still, in a lot of people's minds, they're still athletes who don't fundamentally rebound. They don't fundamentally put their butt on somebody and move guys. And you have, again, the thing with Barnes, I like him. He's functional. He's serviceable. He's not a good rebounder for a small forward. He's average at best. Dudley was the worst rebounding small forward in the NBA during his time as a starter. The only ones who were even close to as bad were Terrence Ross and Corey Brewer, who have no business playing small forward in a starting lineup anyway, but that's beside the point. Those guys are athletes. Dudley is not. That's your problem. You don't have the rebounding help from the guard position. Redick doesn't rebound very well. Collison doesn't rebound. Crawford is Crawford, you know. So, no, and obviously Glenn Davis, all he can do is box out. He can't rebound either. That's it. So you have to play a ball control game. You have to have these games where you don't turn the ball over, and you have to hope that the Thunder are turning the ball over. That's what you have to do. But more than anything else, again, you care about rebounds because you care about possessions. But if you get more field goal attempts, you're doing something right. The Clippers did a great job taking care of the basketball. They got shots up. They just didn't hit as many as the Thunder did. That's where you lost the game.
Something else where I think we have to mention is I think everyone's been really critical of Scotty Brooks this year about kind of his substitution rotations with, you know, maybe overplaying Derek Fisher, overplaying Kendrick Perkins. Tonight we didn't see Perkins in the fourth quarter. We barely saw Derek Fisher out there at all. We didn't see him in closing time at all. And you see these guys come off the bench and really produce. You saw, you know, Steven Adams goes 18 minutes and he has 2 blocks and 9 rebounds. And, you know, all of a sudden Butler's got 14 points off the bench. Reggie Jackson's got 14 points. 14 points for Reggie Jackson is huge. For some reason, he averaged 13 points something. So when he averages more than his average on the season, 14 or more, the Thunder were 32-4 this year. Basically, they don't get a lot of bench scoring. Reggie Jackson is their bench scoring. So essentially, he's what the Harden role was. Basically, when he scores and he gives them scoring production off the bench, the Thunder are really, really hard to beat. So maybe the Clippers have to start worrying about how they can thwart the bench production, because if Adams is going to go out there, give them energy minutes and get boards and rebounds and play defense, you know, the Thunder defense is going to be a lot better, and the Thunder bench production is going to be a lot deeper. Law, one more question, and then we're going to wrap up. So we talked about what all of this happened before. What does this mean going forward? How does this progress into Game 4?
Well, I felt like I always play things to whatever hypothesis that you set. And the hypothesis that I for this series was that it was going to be a 7-game series. It's 2-1. It means that the Clippers are under pressure to win their next game, or they're obviously going to be in a very tough spot. So, hey, you know what? If you're going to be in a pressure situation in a game, you'd rather it be in your building. If the Clippers win the next 2 games in their building, you know, then that means that we're going to get Game 7 naturally. That's all it means. You know, the Clippers, they went in Oklahoma City. They took a game. Now it's the Thunder are doing their part. They had to get a game back, and that's exactly what happened. So that's all it means. That's all it means in the grand scheme of things. But specifically for this game, was a winnable game, and you're really disappointed about the fact that, you know, you let Westbrook and Durant be efficient and very good, but you also let everybody else be efficient and very good, namely Ibaka, Jackson, and Caron Butler. That's the thing. You let too many guys eat tonight.
So much eating. Can't even handle it. That's going to do it for us. The Clippers dropped this one 118-112 to the Thunder. For Law Murray, I'm Fred Katz. Game 4 is scheduled for Sunday afternoon. That's a 12:30 p.m. game Pacific. I believe that should be ABC, but we'll obviously have that up on the site, making it correct. But those Sunday games are usually ABC games. We'll see you after that. Good night, everyone.